Hello, and welcome to Western Washington History. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with us today. As with a lot of stories of Seattle, this one starts with Doc Maynard. Doc Maynard named Seattle after the great chief of the Duwamish, Chief Sealth, who was a good friend of Maynard. Doc had built a farmhouse near the beach. It burned down in 1858 and he built a different house. Part of the house he used was used to treat his patients. In 1868, Doc sold the house and Alki Point to Hans and Anna Hansen, Ivar's mom's parents. Johann and Daisy Haglund, Ivar's parents, ended up with the property. Ivar Johann Haglund is born March 21st, 1906. Many people say he was born in 1905, but the birth records from the time say 1906. Johann, Ivar's dad, was a baker, but he also held real estate investments. Daisy, his mother, died in 1908. The autopsy said stomach cancer, although she was in a very thin, frail condition and under the direct supervision of Linda Hazzard, renowned fasting doctor with no degree, whose practice was in the woods of Olalla. The autopsy would clear her of this crime, but she had a habit of getting rich people to go on her diet, get sick, and sign their wealth over to her. She would wear their clothes and jewelry before they were even dead. When she was finally put on trial for a patient dying, Johann Haglund testified on her behalf. He told the court that Ivar, who was 7 at the time, was still receiving regular treatment from Hazzard. If Ivar started school at the age of 5, then Ivar's first school would have been the first Alki school, which was on Carroll Street and Chilburg Avenue. In the back of the school was a shed that was used as a cafeteria. By the time he would have been 7, a new school was built on property that had been owned by his grandparents, and it was at present-day 3010 59th Avenue in Seattle. The school carried grades 1 through 8 and had 175 students in 1913. By the time Ivar would have been 12 in 1918, the amount of students had more than doubled. They say the original school had a gun rack because the boys carried their rifles in case the kids were attacked by animals on the way to school. That's hard to imagine when you think of Alki today. The old farmhouse close to the beach was moved in 1915, 1 block south, when the government decided they wanted to buy the property to build the Alki Lighthouse. Now the house is located at 3045 64th Avenue, Southwest Seattle. The house is the oldest structure in Seattle still standing. Ivar's mom's brother Edmund taught Ivar to play the guitar and sing. His mom's sister Lorena Smith and her husband Alfred ran the Stockade Hotel near the present intersection of 63rd Avenue and Alki Avenue. That was close to Ivar's home, and he would spend a lot of time there. Ivar's singing and guitar playing got better over the years. While he attended West Seattle High School and the University of Washington, he performed in many theatrical shows. At West Seattle High, he wrote the sports column for the school paper called the Chinook. He said the football team was so bad you couldn't watch it, so he would buy the Seattle Post-Intelligencer and just write the article off of what they wrote. Ivar was in the varsity glee club in 1927 while attending the university. Ivar taught himself to tap dance, do stand-up comedy, and play the ukulele, and would perform his act around Seattle. Ivar graduated from the University of Washington School of Business Administration in 1928 with a degree in economics. He planned to become a stockbroker, but then the great stock market crash of 1929 hit, and his career plans sunk with the stock market. 1929 was a bad year for Ivar in other ways. In November of that year, his dad and the only parent he knew passed away from obstruction of the small intestine and peritonitis, which is the swelling of the abdomen possibly caused by a burst appendix. His dad left him rental houses and of course his mom's inheritance of the Alki property. During the Great Depression, he lived the life of a bohemian, singing folk songs around town and relaxing on the beach. In 1930, Ivar was looking for Northwest folk music. He put an ad out in the newspaper, and an elderly woman gave him a copy of The Old Settler, written by an Olympia resident in 1874 named Judge Francis Henry. Ivar took note of the line, "I think of my pleasant condition, surrounded by acres of clams." During this time, he met his first wife, Margaret, or Maggie, Raffensberg, and in 1931 they married. The marriage license says Ivar lived in Anacortes, but the 1930 census shows he lived on 59th Avenue Southwest in Seattle, where the newlywed couple would eventually live. A side note, Ivar was a friend of Burl Ives, who also lived in Anacortes. Ivar visited his cousins Greta and George Smith in Seaside, Oregon in 1938. They had an aquarium they ran there. He paid attention and took it all in and went back to Seattle to try his hand at the aquarium game. He built his aquarium on Pier 54, which was Pier 3 at the time. Pier 54 was built in 1900 by the Northern Pacific Railroad. Later, it was the home dock for the Kitsap Transportation Company's ferries, as well as Gorst Air Transport air ferry service. Kitsap Transportation went out of business the same year Ivar opened his aquarium in the northeast corner of the pier shed. Northern Pacific still owned the pier at this time. The aquarium opened in 1938. Ivar would charge a dime for adults and 5 cents for kids. He said when he made $10 to $20, it was a good day. Ivar once said about starting the aquarium, "It was an easy way to collect dimes during the Depression. Just pump the environment out of the harbor, circulate it around the tank and back out. All you have to do is feed the critters." In the early days, he would sit on a stool outside the aquarium and play his guitar and sing, always wearing his official captain hat. In 1938, Ivar was part of a letter sent by 50 professors of the University of Washington to President Roosevelt as a plea to end the persecution of the Jews. Ivar talked to Roy Buckley, another guy from West Seattle, about opening a fish and chip counter at the entrance to the aquarium. The restaurant did really well until another restaurant that was also on Pier 54 complained to the owner of the pier, and since they had been there before Buckley's, they had to shut down. In 1940, Ivar dressed up his seal named Pat as a baby, put it in a baby stroller, and pushed it up the hill to Frederick and Nelson's department store so it could meet Santa. He passed through the Pike Place Market on his way. Of course, he had plenty of advertisements on his buggy for his aquarium. Besides Pat the Hare Seal at Ivar's aquarium, you could meet Herman the Hermit Crab, Barney Barnacle, Oscar and Olivia Octopus, Haley the Halibut, and Terrence the wood-boring Teredo Worm. He also had sharks. Okay, they were dogfish, but dogfish is a type of shark. After doing a couple of short radio spots here and there, finally in 1940, radio station KJR called and asked if he could come on because their scheduled guest couldn't make it. In 1941, Ivar met and became friends with folk singers Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, who he invited to be guests at his house while they were performing in union halls around the area. Ivar himself became known as an expert on Northwest folk songs and could sing over 200 songs. KJR gave Ivar his own weekday show in 1944. It was called Around the Sound. The theme song for the broadcast was the old settler song he renamed Acres of Clams. The spot was 15 minutes long and sponsored by his neighbor on Dock 55, who was a fishing supply store. Ivar's landlord changed in 1944 when the Washington Fish and Oyster Company bought the pier and operated their business there. In 1945, Don McCune asked Ivar to come on his radio show as first mate. Don ended up with a kids show on the TV channel KOMO called Captain Puget Show, and the two would sing sea shanties together. When the other restaurant on Pier 54 closed, people visiting the aquarium wanted to feed their children and themselves. Ivar, being a man of opportunity, built a fish and chip counter next to his aquarium in 1946. This was in the opposite southeastern corner from his aquarium, behind his broadcast booth. He called the restaurant Ivar's Acres of Clams. The original counter is still there today at the foot of Madison Street. His slogan would be "Keep Clam." Ivar announced his new restaurant on his radio show.
Down at Ivar's on Pier 54. It's so tasty, so fresh and delicious. It always tastes like more.
Inside the restaurant, on the walls, were life preservers, fish nets, lanterns, rope ladders, ship wheels, oars, and barometers. At his grand opening, Ivar set up a wrestling match with a boxer named 2-Ton Tony Galento and Oscar the Octopus. They wrestled in an aquarium tank. The trainers tried to help the boxer by grabbing its tentacles. In the end, 2-Ton Tony was able to defeat Oscar. Actually, the octopus was dead. 2-Ton Tony said the octopus fouled him and that he should win. The Humane Society found out about the stunt. They questioned Ivar, but it was revealed that Oscar was alive and 2-Ton had been wrestling an already dead octopus. The trainers had been actually making it look like he was fighting him. Another Ivar stunt fell into his lap in 1947. A hose on a railroad tank car carrying syrup broke as the train was right in front of Ivar's Acres of Clams. What else could he do with over 1,000 gallons of syrup all over Alaskan Way? Ivar had pancakes made up and grabbed a large mixing spoon, ran out for the photo opportunity that he couldn't miss. After that, he was described as the Crown Prince of Corn. I'm not sure why. Is it because it was corny or because it was corn syrup? Either way, that's not the last time he would be given a royal title. He was also known as the King and the Mayor of the Seattle Waterfront. Guy Williams, a college friend of Ivar's, came up with the idea to create the Pacific International Freestyle Amateur Clam Eating Contest Association. The first contest was in 1947 and won by Richard Watson, a cab driver from Seattle. In 1948, Joe Silva, a truck driver from Massachusetts, challenged him. He said he was the East Coast clam eating champ. Again, Richard Watson won, but by only 4 clams. The score was 131 to 127. Ivar crowned Watson king of clam eating. Richard Watson's record only held for 2 years, when Dick Taylor ate 337 clams in 10 minutes. The 1950 census shows that Maggie and Ivar were still married, but somewhere between 1950 and 1967 they got divorced. I searched for the year but had no luck. They continued to be friends until his death. Ivar was expanding, and in 1951 Broadway Ivars opened on Capitol Hill. An Ivar Book of Ballads, a book featuring folk songs from the Northwest, was published in 1953. Ivar himself composed over 40 songs and could sing them in English or Chinook. 1956 was a big year for Ivar. After 18 years, he decided to close the aquarium. The pollution in the bay had kept killing his exhibits. The same year, he bought Don's Seafood at 1429 Fifth Avenue in Seattle and remodeled and changed the name to Ivar's Fifth Avenue. Ivar bought property in 1957 with 50 feet of saltwater at 2938 Furman Avenue East in Seattle, valued today at $3.5 million.
If you've been around Puget Sound for any length of time, you probably know me. But some of the kids in the audience have been writing in wondering if I'm real. Yes, I'm for real, and I'm not Colonel Sanders' illegitimate son. I'm not even his cousin, for goodness sake.
In 1958, Ivar was on a TV special and sang his favorite song, The Old Settler. Also in 1958, he promoted the new Ford Edsel, as well as his clam chowder, with a full-page ad in the newspaper. KCTS, the University of Washington's TV station, had Ivar as a host in 1959. A show called Keep Washington Green was sponsored by the state of Washington in hopes of spreading the word about fire safety in the woods.
A fairer state than Washington no man has ever seen. Forests on the hills and vales do keep it evergreen. To keep it wearing of the green is everyone's desire. So everyone should work to stop the curse of forest fire.
In 1960, a U.S. postage stamp was proposed featuring Maine's sardines. Ivar wrote to Washington state senators saying there should be a clam stamp. He stated, "Sardine has been swimming around witlessly being gobbled up by the smarter fish. Clams keep their mouths shut and never stick their neck out when the enemy is around." That wasn't the end of his puns. He continued, stating, a clam stamp would bring in funds for a guided mussel program. He had stamps printed and sent them along with a bag of clams air express to the senator's office. With no hope of a real stamp, Ivar sold the remaining stamps at his gift shop. The U.S. Postal Service found out and came to the restaurant. Ivar told them he would do a ritual scuttling of the stamps into Elliott Bay while a brass band played. They took all of his remaining stamps and the plates used to print them. They told him they would be cremated in the U.S. Post Office furnace that they had in their basement. Ivar thought it was really funny that they had their own crematorium. At some point, Ivar changed the name of his Fifth Avenue restaurant to the Captain's Table. Maybe it was always called both, but it doesn't look like it. In 1962, for the World's Fair, Ivar had a restaurant built on Nob Hill. In 1965, Ivar bought Crawford's Sea Grill at 333 Elliott Avenue. Crawford's made by the same people who make Johnny's Seasoning in Tacoma. He renovated Crawford's to his liking and moved the Captain's Table restaurant to that location. On July 4th, 1965, when the city of Seattle was unable to have a fireworks show, Ivar starts what would be a tradition in Seattle until 2008. He named it 4th of Julyvers. Ivar would shoot fireworks from the beach at his Elliott Bay Captain's Table. When asked about the cost, he said, "It's $18,000." When asked about the cost, he said, "It's $18,000 up in smoke, but at least you know where it's gone." In 1966, Ivar bought Pier 54 for $500,000. His landlord would stay on now as a tenant. Ivar had a full-page advertisement in the newspaper to announce his purchase. He said, "For me to own a wharf would be a paradox. One dock is plenty. Besides, it would take acres and acres of clams to swing the deal." Then I said, "What the hake? Be fearless, or you'll be peerless." So now I am a member of the Elliott Bay Peerage, a Dock Duke, 54th in a line of peers. Ivar was once more married in 1967 to a lady named Opal Newcomb. Opal had worked in the restaurant business most of her life, and in the early 1950s worked in Spokane as a manager of the Davenport Hotel coffee shop. Ivar launched the boat SST in 1967. SST stood for Super Shrimp Trapper. The shrimp boat was built in Redmond. Named Mimi after Ivar's Chihuahua dog. Mimi was 32 feet long. The boat was christened by Princess Littleneck, who smashed a bottle of clam nectar over the bow. Ivar believed breaking champagne over the bow was wasteful, so he gave the champagne to the people at the christening. 1968 was Ivar's 30th year on the waterfront. He didn't wait until the 4th. On July 3rd, he let off a huge fireworks show. To the guests there that night, he said that the fireworks were also to celebrate the restaurant's new dishwasher. After the fireworks, he led a tour through the kitchen where the waitresses stood holding up spotless glasses for inspection. The Port of Seattle came calling in 1968. They wanted to buy Pier 54 and build a World Trade Center there. Ivar turned them down. He loved owning the pier. Ivar built the Salmon House on the shore of Lake Union in 1969. Designed by John Adams, it was built exactly like a native longhouse. In 1971, the Seattle Historical Society gave Ivar and John Adams an award of merit for historical contributions to Seattle. Harbor Tours, Ivar's neighbor on Pier 56, put up a sign in 1971 saying, "Don't feed the seagulls, health regulation." Ivar put his own sign up that said, "Welcome to seagulls and their lovers." Ivar said, "I don't want to embarrass my neighbors. They do what they want with their pier and I'll do what I want on mine. I consider seagulls the unpaid guardians of public health. They keep the waterfront free of garbage. They are beautiful, useful scavengers. The seagulls, ducks, and even the pigeons. You can't discriminate." In 1976, Ivar bought the Smith Tower for $1.8 million. In 2015, it was sold for $73.7 million. Ivar left for the Orient and came back with a 20-foot-long shipping container full of Asian artifacts for the Smith Tower decor, mostly the Chinese Room Observatory. In 1977, Ivar once more got everyone talking when he installed a 16-foot-long rainbow salmon windsock to the flagpole at the top of the tower. A man from the city saw it and sent Ivar a letter telling him it violated Seattle code. Ivar's uncle Thorvald let the press know that the city was attacking his nephew. But the uncle was actually a persona used by Ivar and not a real uncle. The press loved it and turned Ivar into a victim of bullying by the city. Mr. Petty from the city was writing Ivar poetry within 2 weeks of the incident. Here is the first poem. "Since your kite is in violation, you must remove that illegal installation. Keep clam as I am." Ivar attended a hearing and refused to budge. Petty sent him another poem after the hearing. "Oh well, what the hell? Laws are made for mortal men. In this case, I don't expect to win. So keep clam as I am, you ham." The city ruled that he could keep it up there, and the lady presiding over the hearing, Deputy Examiner M. Margaret Clockers, sent Ivar a poem. "The record is clear. Was right from the start. The fish guides the gulls, it gladdens the heart. The hearing wasn't a sham, the variance is granted. So Ivar keep clam." Ivar got a divorce from Opal Newcomb in 1977. I could find no photo of her or much information other than her obituary. In 1980, Ivar's fish bars suddenly multiplied when Ivar's Seafood Incorporated purchased the 14 Arthur Treacher's restaurants and converted them to Ivar Fish Bars. 1983, Ivar was elected to a 6-year term on the Seattle Port Commission. He had filed only as a publicity stunt. He tried to back out, but it was too late. He did no campaigning, but still won by 30,000 votes. Ivar tried to give clam chowder to the other commissioners to make up for not making it to the meetings. While getting out of bed on December 30th, 1985, Ivar had a heart attack and died. Ivar had no children to leave his empire to, but he did make a will prior to his death. He gave some gifts to friends, but the rest of it was divided between the Washington State University Restaurant Program and the University of Washington School of Business. Ivar also stated his employees could buy the restaurant from the university. In the end, each university received $5.2 million, which is about $13 million today. Seattle celebrated Ivar's birthday 2 months after his death with a big celebration. Seattle City Councilman George Benson dedicated the Waterfront trolley station across Alaskan Way from Acres of Clams as Clam Central Station. Scott Kingdon, longtime Ivar's employee, and a group of other longtime employees, as well as private investors, purchased the company. Scott went on to run it until a heart attack in 2001. In 2009, Ivar's president, Bob Dunnigan, stops the 4th of July Festival and ends a 43-year tradition like a true corporate exec. In 2017, he sold Ivar's Pier 54, but signed a long-term lease so Acres of Clams can still operate there. Ivar's now owns 3 full-service restaurants, Acres of Clams, the Salmon House, and Mukilteo Landing. not to mention many fast food fish bar restaurants all over Washington State and also in Portland, Oregon. The number of Ivar's employees has tripled since Ivar's death. Ivar's Puget Sound clam chowder is sold at grocery stores, Washington State ferries, college campuses, and many more places. There is now a sculpture of Ivar feeding seagulls made by Richard Baer out in front of Pier 54. Ivar Haglund was a little bit of everything. Folk singer, pioneer, marine biologist, restaurant owner, husband, friend to the seagulls, but mostly a friend to the Puget Sound. While he ran the waterfront, there was a little more pep in Seattle's step. Ivar helped make everyone a little more clam. Thank you for watching this video, and if you've made it this far and you are not subscribed, please give it a thought. Also, if you know other history-loving people, please pass this video link along. There will be some extra photos following, so enjoy. And until next time, remember, what you do today will be history tomorrow. So keep clam.
Oh, how do you get down to Ivar's? Acres of Clams, please show me the way. Oh, it's easy to get down to Ivar's, just to stop before you walk in the bay. If you drink clam nectar, then really by Hector, you'll feel something new that you never felt before. Your eye will be brighter, your step will be lighter, and love and true romance will knock at your door. There's a traffic problem in Seattle that's causing lots of trouble to me. Our customers get on that Alaskan Way viaduct, and there's no way off that they can see.
As happy as a butter clam when tides are high, I sing a grateful ode to Puget Sound, the land of everything. I love it from Tulalip to Puyallup, Squim and Pish, and to the Dosey Wallops where so many times I've fished. Land that nature loves so much, she stays the whole year round. I trade a royal palace for a shack on Puget Sound.
I've traveled all over this country, and I'll say that if man ever found a place to be peaceful and quiet, that spot is on Puget Sound. I tried to get out of this country, but poverty forced me to stay until I became an old settler. Now nothing could drive me away. No longer a slave of ambition, I laugh at the world and its shams as I think of my happy condition, surrounded by acres of clams.